Hello, uh, my name's Ryan. I'm 29 years old. I'm married. I'm a software engineer, and I have a family that really loves and cares about me. And I have a friends and a circle of support in my life right now that if I humble myself enough, that I can go and I can ask for help. Um, the reason why I'm making this video is that I want to share my story of a secret life I had for 4.5 years, and I hope that it can help someone or help people's family members. Um, I'm not reading off of anything, and I might be kind of all over the place, but I just want to share my story from my heart. So, I had a secret diamond in my secret life, and they say that diamonds are forever, that they show love and internal happiness. What if I were to tell you that I found a diamond more valuable than any diamond ever mined on the face of the earth? It's not as shiny as a diamond. It actually looks more like a quartz crystal, but it's much, much more powerful than a diamond. This diamond will bring pleasure to every aspect of your life, no matter how horrible it may seem. All your worries melt away, and you become excited to do dull, meaningless tasks. You gain superhuman powers. Um, you choose when you need to eat. You choose when you need to sleep. You choose when you need to drink. It's all in your hands. And you can have this diamond for such a cheap price. You're talking 20 bucks. The secret diamond that I'm referring to is crystal methamphetamine. Um, I am a crystal meth addict, and this is my story of crystal meth and the 4.5 years that it controlled my life. And I know what you might be thinking. You might be thinking, I've Googled images of people on crystal meth, and they're missing all their teeth. I have all my teeth. They're skin and bone. I'm not skin and bone. They have these horrible lesions on their arms. I don't have those lesions. That happens to some addicts, but the majority of meth addicts are functional addicts. They can appear normal, they can have regular conversations with you, and they can hold down a job. And that's what I kind of want to explain in my story. So to start, I started using crystal meth when I was in college. I saw that people on Adderall, they were just excelling at coursework, could stay up long hours, and I just didn't think that it was fair that they had this extra boost of energy that other people didn't have. And Adderall is just a synthetic form of methamphetamine. The major difference is the route of administration. Adderall you take as a pill and it slowly dissolves in your stomach. With methamphetamine, you either snort, smoke, or inject it. And I remember the night that I first did crystal meth. I was at my apartment that was close to college, and I had a friend over, and we were working on a project, and he just had so much energy. And I asked him, how do you have so much energy? I'm dying here. I can't focus. I can't think. We've been at this for 8 hours. I'm so tired. He told me he just takes this thing called tea. And tea is a slang word for crystal meth. I didn't really know that at the time, but I knew it was something. So I take responsibility there. So I decided to take some. We made a little line on the table, and I snorted it. And within 5 seconds, my life changed. There was a life before crystal meth, and then there's a life after crystal meth. Within those 5 seconds, euphoria came over me, a higher level of consciousness came over me, and my focus was 100%. And I think the most dangerous thing that happened was, for the first time in my life, I actually loved myself. I felt worthy. I felt confident. I felt social. All these emotions that I have struggled with my entire life. So I did it. We worked for another 12 hours straight, not needing to eat, not needing to sleep, not needing to drink. And the next day, I just crashed. I slept for about 6 hours. I woke up, and I felt relatively normal. And within a day, I felt perfectly fine. And I had no cravings for it. I didn't think I wanted it. I knew I could go without it. Deep down, that was a lie. And the lie is that I knew in my heart that I would need to feel that feeling again. I would need to feel that love for myself again. So a couple weeks go by, I don't use. And then another assignment comes up. So call up my friend and he gets me some, and I do it again. Exact same result. This was a pattern for my meth use for about the first 4 months. I was in complete control. I graduated that semester with a 4.0, the highest GPA I have ever gotten in engineering school. And shortly after, I had job interviews, and I knew that for every job interview, instead of being at 80%, I could be at 100%. So naturally, I did crystal meth again. And I exceeded the interviewer's expectations, and I landed a job at a federal contractor working on situational awareness for drones in research and development. And that was my all-time dream job, and I got it. And I just wanted to take a little time and talk about how meth affects the brain. So we have different neurotransmitters in our brains, serotonin, norepinephrine, and dopamine. Dopamine is by far the most powerful neurotransmitter. It's our fight or flight response. It tells us to eat when we're hungry because we get that rewarding feeling that we're no longer hungry. It tells us when to sleep. And it also, most crucially, says what is needed to survive. So when you take methamphetamine, within about 5 seconds, it hits your brain and floods your dopamine receptors with dopamine. And it also prevents the reduction of dopamine in your brain. And this is what causes that euphoric, confident feelings that humans aren't supposed to experience. And that's the thing. We're never supposed to feel that high. And it allows you to feel it so quickly. Another thing about crystal meth is that your upper brain is your decision making, your cerebral cortex. It tells you how to make rational decisions and decisions based on previous events. And your midbrain is your survival part. It's sex, food, how to survive. So dopamine affects the midbrain, and it causes the midbrain to gain control. And it weakens the upper brain, which will allow you to make poor decisions. So over time, and it's not like alcohol where you drink alcohol and you immediately are affected by it. It's not like that. Crystal meth is a very slow, powerful drug that slowly, over years and months, slowly changes your brain so that your midbrain has more control than your upper brain, the cerebral cortex. So I've gotten a lot of questions about how did you pass the drug test? Well, crystal meth only stays in your system for about 3 days, and in that point in my addiction, I was able to stop for 3-4 days. I could stop when I wanted to, and by this point it was 6-7 months. But then something changed. I was working, and I needed that medicine to feel confident enough to do the research and development work I needed. So I started to use it every single day. And I still wasn't making poor decisions. I still wasn't doing dangerous things. But I needed it to continue working. And when I would try to stop taking it, I started getting these extreme panic attacks. And these panic attacks they go away in 10 minutes, 15 minutes. These panic attacks lasted 3-4 hours, and they made me want to kill myself. So I decided to resign from that research and development job, and I continued to use. I then relocated as a software engineer at an insurance company, which should be a lot less stressful, a lot more easier. And by this time, I was using crystal meth multiple times a day, and I needed it to be able to function. I needed it to just be able to do day-to-day activities. And it was during this time that my midbrain started taking control over my upper brain, and the decisions I made began to be more dangerous. At this time, none of my family and friends knew that I was using. I can remember one Thanksgiving and Christmas. I went out for the holidays, and I can remember going into the bathroom of a family member's house and, smoking a little bit just to take the edge off. And I came out so confident and so happy, and just that euphoric feeling that I'm with my family, I'm with people that I love. And none of my family members knew. Another thing about methamphetamine is it is odorless. You can't tell when someone's smoking it. And that's dangerous. So I returned back after the holiday season, and I worked, and then I started gaining the social aspect of meth. And that is hanging around people that do meth, that share that euphoric feeling. And I was living in Detroit at that time, and I started hanging out with my drug dealers at night. I would get up in the morning, I would go to work. My performance was good, my performance was above average, thought everything was great. By that time, my brain was hijacked by methamphetamine. I was no longer myself. I could talk to you like the way I'm talking to you now. I could give presentations, I could code my software, but things started to change. Instead of going to sleep at night, I decided to go to Detroit, 8 Mile Road, and hang out with my new friends. And 8 Mile is a really rough part of Detroit, and I started to see things that were really scary, had guns pointed to my head, saw people get raped, participated in some really bad behaviors. And none of that mattered because I was on crystal meth and I had that euphoric high. Slowly, my second life began to appear. I was a software engineer during the day, and I was a meth addict at night. Eventually, I decided to resign from that job because I kept trying to stop crystal meth, and the panic attacks were getting worse and worse. And eventually, I tried to kill myself. I took about 20 Tylenol, and I woke up with the most horrific stomach ache, and I was throwing up, and it was really horrible. And the only thing I knew how to do was to smoke more meth to stop the pain. So that's what I did. I resigned from my job, and for a month I was alone in Detroit, smoking every minute of every day. My addiction spiraling out of control, putting myself into these dangerous situations. All along, my family never knew. They just thought I was experiencing high anxiety. I eventually moved to Saginaw with my spouse, and my addiction was more powerful than ever. I didn't have to work anymore. So my goals in life was to obtain more crystal meth and to hide it from all the people that loved and cared about me. And I can remember there were nights when I would drive to different cities after my spouse went to bed, and I just knew I had to be home by 6 a.m. before he woke up. Or I would make up some excuse. I stayed at a friend's house or something like that. And one night I can remember there was a drug deal that went bad, and I'm not going to get into the details of it because I don't think that's productive. But I was almost killed. And I remember coming home and I didn't care. I laid down in bed, and then I woke up and I made breakfast like nothing happened. And then that day we went to the next town over, and we actually went to the beach and we had a great time. Nothing really seemed to matter. The turning point of my meth addiction was when I started not to sleep. And you can function normally with zero sleep for about 72 hours. Some people a little longer, some people a little shorter. And I went into meth psychosis, and I began acting crazy. And this is when my family knew that there was a problem. This is when my family knew that there was something wrong. And it took me a couple of days to admit it, but I admitted to my family members that I've been addicted to crystal meth for 3 years. But I told them that I could control it, that I would start going to meetings, I would start learning about recovery. And that was an utter blatant lie. It was a complete lie. I continued to use crystal meth. I just used it so I could control it because I thought I could control it. So I continued using for a couple more months, and then that Christmas I decided not to go to my family's because I was too high on crystal meth, and at that point I started mixing it with cocaine and crack, and I also shot up for the first time. And that was big for me because I hated needles. I never thought I would shoot up. I never in my life thought I would shoot up. But my midbrain needed a higher high. It needed to feel that survival instinct. And I decided to shoot up. And my addiction just got worse from there. Eventually, I went into a rehab. And I wish I could say that that rehab saved me and that I was all better. After I got out of rehab, I went to meetings and I really worked a program of recovery. But that's when the cravings started coming. And cravings are the most horrific things that anyone can ever go through. Till this day, I still dream about crystal meth every single night. Every single night I have the most vivid dreams about me going, getting, smoking crystal meth, and doing all these horrible behaviors that I did. And when you wake up, sometimes I would check my nightstand thinking, did I get some? Did I get some? Let me smoke it. Or sometimes you wake up in such immense shame from all the things that you did. In addition to the dreams, you get daily cravings. And these cravings are so powerful, more powerful than anything I've ever felt in my life, worse than the death of a family member. Because my brain is craving that dopamine, and it wants that dopamine high. So within 84 days after I left rehab, I relapsed. And initially I started off slow again. Okay, I can control this for another 3 years. Nothing bad happened to me until about 3.5 years. So what's the problem? Well, addiction is progressive. You don't start where you ended off. You start 10 miles ahead. And I can say I probably controlled it for about a week. And then I began to spiral out of control again. I drove to Detroit one night. I was involved in a sting operation. By the grace of God, they let me go, which might not have been the best thing. But I came back, and that didn't even deter me from stop doing meth. Eventually, it got to a point where I needed to do so much meth, I couldn't afford it because my family took away my money, so I didn't have it. And I started to resort to other ways of getting it. Other things that I'm not proud of, so I will not share them. Eventually it got to such a point, I just didn't want to live anymore. And the meth had turned on me. Instead of me having panic attacks, I was getting these very vivid suicidal thoughts. So this time I looked up the lethal dose of Tylenol, and it was 32. So I took 42 to make sure that the job got done. And I had called a friend, and they didn't like how I sounded, so they actually called the police for a wellness check. And when the officer got there, I was all over the place. I was hyperventilating. I had so much pain. I was put in a hospital for about 5 days. My Tylenol level was at 400. The regular level should be 32. It took 5 days for the Tylenol antidote to limit the Tylenol to that 32. Shortly after that, I went into a psychiatric center for 2.5 weeks. And then from there, I went to another rehabilitation center for about 3 weeks. And it was there at that rehabilitation center that I had to make a decision. I was offered crystal meth by another one of the patients there, and I needed to make a decision. Was I going to stay there and do it? Was I going to go rat on this person and then have a reputation? Or was I going to leave? And it took me about 6 hours to make that decision, and I was so close to going up to that guy and said, get me some because I want it, because I need it. But I decided to leave, and then I went to New York, where my mom lives. I stayed with her, and that's when my addiction, as of now, has stopped. And addiction is a lifelong process. It's never going to end, and I don't have years and years of sobriety. I'm relatively new. I'm working a program, and I'm doing the best I can, taking it a day at a time. And honestly, to tell you, I don't know if I'm going to relapse again. I know I cannot relapse for today, but I can't guarantee you tomorrow or the next day. And I watch other people who struggle with crystal meth, and they relapse 6, 7, 8 times, and I really hope that that's not me. Another thing I wanted to talk about that was a big contributor to my relapse was triggers. And triggers are just things that remind you of meth, that really affect you. And they may seem silly, but some of my triggers are the rock salt. If you live in a normal climate, you know what rock salt looks like. It looks exactly like crystal meth. And whenever I see rock salt, I see crystal meth, and I want to do it. Another trigger, if you live in a northern climate, is you see people's breaths. And that reminds me of the meth smoke. So every time I see someone's breath, it reminds me of meth, and it makes me want to do meth. A lot of things on WebMD about meth say, like, you don't get a physical addiction to it, it's only psychological. But that psychological addiction is much worse than any other physical addiction. Physical addictions will go away within a couple days. And I'm not saying you don't need medical attention if you have a physical addiction. You definitely do if you're on benzos or heroin or alcohol. But with meth, you don't. You're not going to die from it. But psychologically, it's going to kill you. It's going to make you feel suicidal. Also, I notice on a lot of WebMD and medical sites, they don't talk about these long-term effects of crystal meth. That you're going to be in a severely depressed state when you stop taking crystal meth. Not for a month, not for 2 months, but we're talking up to a year. You're going to have the inability to feel joy for a year. And that is so scary, to wake up every morning after having a meth dream, and then you feel like shit, and then on top of that, there's the cravings, and it's really horrific. And I wish that these sites could document this, that they could show people what it's actually like. Because it's not necessarily like the pictures you see of people on crystal meth. I never lost the weight. I never had a cavity. I never had skin rashes. Those are just symptoms that affect some people of meth. Other meth users can function normally. Statistically, if you work in an office with 100 people, 3 of those people are abusing some sort of amphetamine. And that's a lot. That's a lot of people. It might not be methamphetamine. It might be Adderall. It might be Ritalin. But 3 people are abusing some sort of amphetamine. And amphetamines are so addictive. And another thing I just want to say is, if you're interested or you think that you might want to try this, don't. Because I was addicted the very first time I took crystal meth. And I thought I wasn't addicted because I was able to stop. And I could choose when I wanted to use crystal meth. And that's not true. Deep down, after you feel that feeling, you know that some point in your life you're going to want to feel it again. My addiction took about 3 years to spiral out of control. I know people that's addiction spiral out of control in a couple weeks, a couple months, and I've also met people whose addictions have spiraled out of control after years. It's really, really dangerous. And I wish it was never invented. I wish I would have never tried it, because this is a lifelong struggle that I'm going to have to deal with now. In comparison to other drugs, methamphetamine is the most addictive drug. Heroin is the most dangerous, but methamphetamine is the most addictive. Heroin, cocaine raises your dopamine levels, that feel-good hormone, to about 400 dopamine units. Methamphetamine raises your dopamine units to 1,400 units. A measurement of dopamine that should never be in the human brain. And that's what it makes it so dangerous. But there is hope. I'm proof of that. I don't have a lot of sobriety, but I keep on fighting it. And I don't know if I'm going to relapse. And I really hope that I'm able to make another video in a year saying I'm still here and I'm doing great. But unfortunately, that's not the case. I don't know that. All I have is today, and all I can do is a day at a time. So please, if you're in college, don't do this drug. It's one of the most highly abused drugs in college because of the focus. It's not worth it because methamphetamine will take away everything. It'll take your family, it'll take your friends, your belongings, most of all your self-worth, and your will to live. So I hope this video can help anyone who's struggling with addiction, that there is hope, there is support out there for you. I'll put some links in the description if you're struggling, and for family members to understand that even though the addict stops using, it doesn't mean that they're not going to start using up again. Meth is so addictive, and meth is so powerful. It hijacks your brain and will make you lie and do things that morally are unacceptable to you. And this process can take months, years, decades before it completely takes control of your brain. But once it takes control of your brain, you will start doing horrible things, and you will end up in either jails, institutions, or you will die. So I think that's all I got. Again, I hope this video can reach one person who's struggling or thinking about trying meth, and maybe this will help deter them or just give a better perspective to family members on what meth does to someone. So I really hope that I can make another video in a year saying I'm good and clean. God bless everyone. Bye.